"Let him go, Dawson." Ethan Wolfe stepped from the shadow's rifle aimed at the marshal's chest. 40 yards. One shot. The boy. Tommy gasped as the marshal's grip tightened on his arm. "Or, what, you'll shoot me in front of 8 witnesses. I'll shoot you because you're threatening a child. 8 guns. 1 innocent man, and a 12-year-old boy holding the only evidence that could save him." But to understand how a mountain man, a nun, and a child came to face a firing squad in 1876 Colorado, we need to go back 4 days, back to a scream that tore across the San Juan Mountains, and the moment Ethan Wolfe made a choice that would put him on trial for his life. The cabin stood where it had always stood at 10,000 feet, where the aspens gave way to spruce, and the air tasted of stone and memory. Ethan Wolfe sat in his chair by the window, 90 years old now, white beard reaching his chest, hands gnarled, but still strong. The afternoon light painted the meadow gold. His granddaughter Emily burst through the door, 16 years old, tears streaming down her face. She collapsed at his feet, her whole body shaking with sobs that seemed too big for someone so young. "Grandpa," she gasped between breaths, I can't do it. I'd rather die." Ethan set down the piece of wood he'd been carving. He'd been expecting this. Her father had written him 2 weeks ago about the arrangement with Richard Morrison. 45 years old, twice widowed, wealthy, respectable. The kind of man who collected things, including wives. "Tell me what happened, child." Emily wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Papa says I have to marry Mr. Morrison, this fall. He's already agreed to it. Shook hands on it like I'm a horse being sold." Fresh tears came. "I told him no. I told him I want to go to college, study medicine like Aunt Mary Sarah did. But he says that's foolishness. Says a woman's place is with a husband making a home bearing children. And you don't want that. Not like this." She looked up at him, green eyes blazing through the tears. "Not because someone tells me I have to. Not with a man I don't love, don't even know. Grandpa, I'd rather die than marry him." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Outside, a hawk circled the meadow wings, spread wide against the blue. He watched it, remembering another bird from another time when the world was younger, and he was too. "Then don't marry him," he said finally. "Choose your own life." Emily shook her head. "But Papa will disown me. I'll have nothing. No money, no home. Where would I go?" "You'd go where all brave people go when they choose truth over comfort." Ethan leaned forward, his voice soft but firm. "You'd go towards what you want, not away from what you fear. There's a difference, Emily, a big one." "I don't understand." "Let me tell you a story." He settled back in his chair, eyes distant now, seeing not the meadow before him, but a different place, a different time. "About a time I was scared too, and about a woman who taught me that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is break the rules everyone says you have to follow." Emily pulled herself up, sat cross-legged at his feet like she had when she was small, and he would tell her stories of bears and mountain lions and winters so cold your breath froze before it left your mouth. "It was September 1876, Ethan began. "I was 46 years old, and I was about to meet a nun who would change my life forever." His eyes closed. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, grown younger somehow, as if the telling took him back to that man he'd been that September morning when everything changed. The scream tore across the San Juan Mountains long before anyone saw the blood on Kate Bennett's leg. It echoed through the aspen groves already turning gold with the first touch of autumn. It bounced off granite cliffs that had stood for millennia and would stand for millennia, more indifferent to human suffering. The sound carried on the thin air sharp and clear at 10,000 feet, where sound traveled differently than in the valleys below. This was not the cry of someone who had stumbled over a root or twisted an ankle on loose stone. This was not the sound of surprise or even ordinary pain. This was the sound of death arriving early, uninvited, venomous. This was the sound of a woman who knew with absolute certainty that she was about to die alone in the wilderness and that no one would find her body until the bears and the wolves had scattered her bones across the mountainside. But to understand how a bride of Christ came to be lying in a high meadow with a mountain man kneeling between her legs, his mouth pressed to her bare thigh while blood stained the torn fabric of her habit, we must go back. Back 4 days. Back to when the sun rose over Colorado Territory on a September morning in 1876, painting the peaks orange and gold, promising nothing but another quiet day in a land that had known too much violence, too much grief, too much silence. The cabin at 10,500 feet. Ethan Wolfe woke in darkness, as he always did, a few minutes before dawn. His body knew the rhythm of the sun, even without seeing it. 25 years in these mountains had written the patterns into his bones. He lay still for a moment listening. The wind in the spruce trees outside, the creak of the cabin settling in the cold, the skitter of some small creature, a mouse probably in the walls. Normal sounds, safe sounds. He rose. The cabin was 12 feet by 14 one-room walls, chinked with mud and moss roof of split pine logs covered in sod. He'd built it with his own hands in the winter of 1852, when he'd first come to these mountains, when he'd still been a young man running from a war he couldn't forget and didn't want to remember. He dressed in the dark, buckskin pants patched at the knees, elk-hide shirt dark with age and smoke, boots he'd cobbled himself from bear leather. Around his waist a belt that held a Bowie knife 14 inches long, its handle wrapped in deer tendon, its blade sharp enough to shave with. On his right hip, a Colt Army Model 1860 44 caliber loaded, always loaded. The rifle leaning against the cabin wall was a Sharps Model 1874 50 caliber with a 34-inch barrel and a tang sight he'd adjusted himself set for 400 yards. He could drop a bull elk at 600 with that rifle. Had seen the bullets punch through a grizzly bear's skull like it was made of pine bark. He was 46 years old, though the wilderness had aged him in ways that numbers couldn't measure. His beard hung thick and dark, threaded with silver, that caught the early light like spider silk. Hair long enough to tie back, though half of it had escaped during the night. 6 feet 3 inches tall, shoulders broad from splitting wood and hauling elk carcasses up impossible slopes. Hands large and scarred, the kind of hands that could snap a deer's neck or cradle a dying sparrow with equal capability. On the rough-hewn shelf above his bed, a tintype photograph in a handmade wooden frame. Faded now, the silver oxidizing to brown but still clear enough. A woman with dark hair and kind eyes, a small boy with a gap-toothed smile, Mary and Daniel Wolfe, his wife, his son. Dead 11 years now. Buried in Tennessee soil he would never see again. Ethan did not look at the photograph as he gathered his gear. He never looked at it in the morning. That was a nighttime ritual when the fire burned low and the wolves howled and the loneliness became a physical weight pressing against his chest. In the mornings he worked. Work kept the ghosts at bay. But this morning as he reached for his rifle, his hand brushed against something else. A leather pouch, small tied with a rawhide string. He froze. For a moment he considered leaving it where it was, pretending he hadn't felt it, but curiosity, or perhaps something deeper, made him pick it up. Inside was a letter. The paper yellowed with age, the ink faded but still legible. He knew what it was without opening it. Had known for 11 years. From Mary, dated March 12, 1865, the day she died. He'd carried it for 11 years. Moved it from cabin to cabin, from Tennessee to Wyoming to Colorado. Never opened it, never could, because once he read it, she would be truly gone. As long as the letter remained unread, there was still something of her he didn't know, some part of her still waiting for him. His hand trembled slightly as he returned it to the pouch, tied the string, placed it back on the shelf. Not today. Maybe never. Some doors were better left closed. He lifted the Sharps rifle, felt its familiar weight, checked the breech, clean as always, loaded 5 cartridges into the leather loops on his belt, 50-90 Sharps, 500-grain bullets, 90 grains of black powder, canteen filled with snowmelt from the creek, jerky wrapped in oilcloth, tinderbox, skinning knife, everything a man needed to survive a day in country that killed the unprepared with casual indifference. He stepped off the porch and started up the mountain. Elk were moving to higher elevations now that September had arrived. He needed meat. Winter was coming in 6 weeks, maybe 7, and a man alone needed at least 300 pounds of dried meat to make it through. The mathematics of survival. Simple, brutal, absolute. The morning air bit at his lungs, clean and sharp tasting of pine resin and granite dust. His boots found purchase on the trail without conscious thought. 25 years of walking these mountains had written the paths into his muscles, into the way his weight shifted, into the rhythm of his breathing. He moved upward through the spruce forest, watching for sign. Elk scat, still fresh steam rising from it in the cold air. Tracks in the mud near the creek. A bull, maybe 500 pounds, moving north toward the high meadows. He followed. The forest opened up above 11,000 feet, giving way to crumholts, those twisted, wind-tortured trees that marked the edge between forest and alpine tundra. Beyond that, nothing but rock and sky and the kind of silence that made a man hear his own heartbeat. Ethan paused at the tree line, scanning the slopes above with eyes that could spot a mule deer at 1,000 yards. Nothing yet. The elk would be in the meadows, feeding on the last of the summer grass before the snows came. He started across the open ground, exposed now, vulnerable to weather and sight. But this was where the game was. This was where a man earned his winter. And then, faint, carried on the wind, a sound that did not belong. A scream. Female. Terrified. Maybe 400 yards to the south, maybe less. Ethan froze, every sense sharpening. Could be a trap. Bandits sometimes used a woman's scream to draw in rescuers, then robbed them, killed them, left them for the coyotes. He'd seen it twice in his years out here. But the scream came again, and this time it was followed by a word, desperate pleading. Help! He turned and ran. Kate Bennett woke to the sound of chapel bells ringing matins, calling the faithful to prayer in the thin gray light before dawn. She lay in her narrow bed in her narrow room, staring at the wooden crucifix on the whitewashed wall, and asked herself the same question she had asked every morning for 7 years. Why am I here? Not a crisis of faith exactly. She believed in God, believed in Christ, believed in the church and its mission to serve the poor, to teach the ignorant, to comfort the afflicted. But belief and calling were different things. And lately, more and more, she wondered if she had mistaken refuge for vocation, if she had run to the convent, not because God had called her, but because her father had driven her, and this had been the only door that would open. She was 29 years old, though she felt both younger and infinitely older. Born in Philadelphia to Judge Patrick Bennett and his wife Margaret, dead now these 12 years. Raised in a house on Walnut Street with servants and silver and all the trappings of respectability. Educated by tutors, fluent in French and Latin, able to discuss Virgil and Dante and the Transcendentalists. A lady in every sense that 1860s Philadelphia understood that word. And then came 1869. Came Congressman William Bradford, 45 years old, widowed, twice powerful, connected, hungry for a young wife to grace his dinner parties and bear his children. Came her father's ultimatum. You will marry him, Catherine. This is not a discussion. This is your duty. She had said no. Her father had said then, you will have nothing. No money, no home, no family. She remembered the sound of his fist on the mahogany desk. Remembered the way his face had turned red, then purple, then a kind of white that frightened her more than the anger. She remembered Bradford's face when she refused him. The way his expression had shifted from surprise to fury in the space of a heartbeat. The way he'd grabbed her wrist hard enough to bruise. You think you can say no to me? The knife had been an accident. At least she told herself it was an accident. A bread knife left on the sideboard in Bradford's study. She'd pulled away from him, stumbled backwards, her hand striking the handle. The blade had been hot, recently used to cut a loaf still steaming from the oven. It had burned her wrist, left a scar like a white crescent moon. She'd run that night. Taken the $200 she'd saved from birthday gifts and Christmas money, packed one bag, left in the middle of the night, boarded a train headed west, away from Philadelphia, away from William Bradford, away from her father's rage and her own fear. Colorado Territory. Our Lady of Sorrows Convent. A stone building in a silver mining town called Silverton, perched at 9,300 feet in the San Juan Mountains. She'd arrived in the winter of 1869, half frozen, half starved, wholly desperate. Mother Superior Grace Walsh had taken one look at her and said, "Child, come inside." 7 years now, 7 years of teaching children to read and write and do their sums. 7 years of morning prayers and evening vespers and the great silence between Compline and Lauds. 7 years of wearing the black habit of covering her red-brown hair, of keeping her eyes downcast and her voice soft and her heart locked away behind walls of stone and doctrine. And every morning the same question, "Why am I here?" She rose dressed in the dim light, pulled the veil over her hair, picked up the rosary that hung from her belt. Simple wooden beads worn smooth by years of prayer. She had carried this rosary since the day she took her vows in 1870. Poverty, chastity, obedience. She had meant them. At the time, she had meant them with all the fervor of a 23-year-old woman who believed that surrender was the same thing as freedom. But lately she wondered. The convent was quiet as she moved through the corridor, her footsteps muffled by the wool habit toward the chapel. The other sisters were already there. Mother Grace, Sister Agnes, Sister Mary, Sister Rose. 4 women, all of them older than Kate, all of them seemingly at peace with their choices. She envied them that peace. The Mass was in Latin, the responses automatic. Kyrie Ellison, Christe Ellison, Lord have mercy, Christ have mercy. The words rolled through her mind like water over stones, smooth and familiar and somehow insufficient. She wanted more than mercy. She wanted understanding. She wanted to know if she had wasted 7 years hiding behind these walls. After breakfast, she went to the schoolroom. 25 children waited there, ages 6 to 14. Children of miners and homesteaders and shopkeepers. A few orphans. She loved them. That was the one thing she knew without doubt. She loved the way their faces lit up when they understood a difficult concept. Loved the way they argued over books. Loved the way they drew pictures and told stories and dreamed impossible dreams. Maybe that was enough. Maybe love, even love for children who were not your own, was a sufficient reason to stay. She taught arithmetic in the morning, reading in the afternoon. At 3 o'clock she dismissed the class and stood at the window, watching the children scatter toward their homes, their laughter fading into the thin mountain air. Beyond the town, the San Juan Mountains rose in great waves of stone and forest, their peaks already dusted with early snow. Beautiful, harsh, indifferent to human suffering. She found herself wondering what it would be like to walk into those mountains and simply keep walking until the walls of the convent were so far behind her that she could no longer feel their weight. A knock at the door. She turned to find Mother Grace standing in the doorway. 58 years old, her face lined by years of mountain sun and mountain cold, her eyes still sharp, still kind. "Catherine, may I speak with you?" They sat in Mother Grace's small office, a room barely larger than a closet, furnished with a desk, 2 chairs, a shelf of books. Grace poured tea from a chipped pot, handed Kate a cup. "You seem troubled, child." Kate hesitated. Honesty was a risk. But so was silence. "I wonder sometimes if I belong here." Grace did not seem surprised. "You've been wondering that for some time, I think." "Yes." "Tell me, Catherine, when you came here 7 years ago, were you running to something or running from something?" The question struck like a blade between the ribs. Kate set down her teacup, afraid her hands would shake. "I don't know. Both, maybe. Does it matter?" "It matters very much." Grace leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "Faith is not a hiding place. It is a battlefield. If you are here because you are afraid of the world, then you are wasting your life and insulting God. But if you are here because you genuinely desire to serve, then your doubts are simply part of the struggle. All of us struggle." Kate looked down at her hands, pale against the black fabric of her habit, the scar on her wrist faint but still visible. "I love teaching the children. I love the work, but sometimes I feel like I'm watching life happen from behind a wall, like I'm not fully alive." Grace reached across the desk, placed one gnarled hand over Kate's. "Then perhaps you need to climb the wall, to see what's on the other side. Not to abandon your vows, but to test them, to make sure they're real." "How do I do that?" "Go out into the world, not far, just into the mountains. Pray there, think there, away from these walls. Sometimes God speaks more clearly in the wilderness than in the chapel." Kate felt something shift in her chest, something that might have been fear or might have been hope. "May I go today?" Grace smiled. "Yes, but take care. The mountains are beautiful, but they are also dangerous. Stay on the trails. Be back before dark." Kate nodded, stood, turned to leave. "Catherine," she looked back, "remember what St. Augustine said? An unjust law is no law at all. If you discover that your vows were made out of fear rather than faith, then breaking them may be the most faithful thing you can do." Kate walked out of Silverton with a wicker basket on her arm and a prayer book tucked into her belt. She did not know where she was going exactly, just away. Away from the convent, away from the questions she couldn't answer, away from the weight of 7 years pressing down on her shoulders like stones. The trail led south following a creek through aspen groves gone gold with autumn. The air was cool but not cold, maybe 58 degrees. The sky a blue so deep it hurt to look at. She walked slowly, favoring her left leg a little. An old injury from childhood, a fall from a horse. Nothing serious, but enough to leave her with a slight limp when she was tired. She gathered wildflowers as she walked. Alpine sunflowers, bright yellow with black centers. Columbines. Colorado's state flower, purple and white, delicate as lace. Indian paintbrush, red-orange, shocking against the green of the underbrush. She placed them carefully in the basket, imagining how the children's faces would light up when she brought them back. Tommy, especially. The boy loved to draw, spent his free time sketching birds and trees and mountains, his tongue stuck between his teeth in concentration. She climbed higher, following the creek toward its source. At 9,800 feet, the aspens gave way to spruce, dark and dense, the air sharp with resin. The trail here was rougher, strewn with rocks and roots, but she pressed on, drawn by something she could not name, a need to see what was beyond the next ridge, to prove to herself that she was capable of more than teaching children and saying prayers. She reached a clearing at 10,000 feet, a bowl of meadow ringed by spruce, a small pond fed by snowmelt at its center. Wildflowers grew thick here, protected from the worst of the wind. She knelt beside the pond, set down her basket, cupped water in her hands, and drank, cold enough to ache in her teeth, pure enough to taste of stone and sky. She sat back on her heels, looking up at the mountains rising all around her, feeling small and insignificant and strangely free. Out here no one watched her, no one judged her. She could think her forbidden thoughts, could admit her doubts, could wonder what her life might have been if she had not run to the convent but had instead run toward something else. Toward what? She did not know. That was the problem. She had no idea what she wanted, only what she did not want. She stood, walked to the far edge of the meadow where a stand of columbines grew thick and tall. She would take some of these, bring them back for the children. She reached for a particularly large bloom, stretching up on her toes to grasp the stem. Her foot came down on moss-covered stone. Slippery. Treacherous. She went down hard, basket flying, flowers scattering, her left knee slamming into granite with a crack that she felt more than heard. Pain shot up her thigh, white-hot, nauseating. She gasped, tried to push herself up, slipped again, fell onto her side, and heard it. That sound. That dry, angry rattle that every creature in the mountains knows and fears. She froze. 3 feet away, coiled in the grass beside the very stone, she had stepped on a prairie rattlesnake. 3.5 feet long, thick as a man's wrist, greenish-gray with dark brown blotches running down its back. Its head was raised triangular ugly, its tongue flicking in and out, tasting the air. Its tail vibrated so fast it blurred, producing that sound, that terrible sound. Kate could not breathe, could not move. She knew enough to know that rattlesnakes struck when threatened, when startled, when approached too closely. She had done all 3. Please, she thought, please, God. She tried to inch backward, moving as slowly as she could, but her hand pressed down on a twig, and it snapped, loud as a gunshot in the stillness. The snake struck, faster than thought, faster than sight, a blur of scales and muscle and fangs. It hit her left thigh high, maybe 5 inches above the knee, driving its fangs through the heavy black fabric of her habit and into the soft flesh beneath. She felt the puncture, felt the hot rush of venom entering her bloodstream, felt the snake's jaw clench and release. She screamed. The snake recoiled, slithered away into the underbrush, disappearing as quickly as it had appeared, leaving only that sound, that rattle, fading into silence. Kate looked down at her leg. 2 small holes in the fabric, dark with blood. The pain was immediate, intense, a burning that spread outward from the bite like fire through dry grass. She pressed her hands against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding, but the blood seeped through her fingers, warm and sticky. She tried to stand. Her leg buckled. She fell again, this time onto her back, staring up at the sky. The blue seemed darker now, the edges of her vision starting to blur. Her heart hammered against her ribs, too fast, irregular. Nausea rose in her throat. This is how I die, she thought, alone in the wilderness, and no one will ever know what happened. She opened her mouth to scream again, but her voice came out weak, barely more than a whisper. "Help someone, please." The words disappeared into the vast indifference of the mountains, and then from somewhere close the sound of running footsteps. Ethan burst into the clearing at a dead-run rifle in one hand, eyes scanning for threat. He saw her immediately. A woman dressed in black lying on her back near the edge of the meadow. Alone. Hurt. He approached cautiously, weapon ready, watching the tree line for ambush. But there was nothing. Just the woman and the silence. He knelt beside her, saw the blood on her leg, saw the torn fabric, saw her face pale and sweating, saw the terror in her eyes. "Ma'am, what happened?" She tried to speak, but the words came out jumbled, incoherent. He looked more closely at the wound, at the pattern of the bleeding, at the 2 small puncture marks, and understood. Snakebite. Rattler. He looked around, saw the dead flowers scattered across the ground, saw the basket, saw the tracks in the soft earth where something had slithered away. He turned back to the woman, saw that she was wearing a nun's habit, a sister, a bride of Christ, and she was dying. "Where did it bite you?" She pointed to her leg, to the high part of her thigh, and he understood the problem immediately. The bite was beneath her skirts, hidden by layers of heavy fabric. To reach it, to treat it, he would have to expose her, touch her, a nun. He met her eyes, saw the fear there, but also the understanding. She knew what had to happen. "Ma'am, listen to me. That venom is already in your blood. If I don't get to that bite right now, you'll be dead in an hour, maybe less. I need to see the wound. I need to extract the venom. Do you understand?" She nodded, barely, her lips moving in what might have been a prayer. "I'm going to cut your dress just enough to reach the bite. I give you my word. I will not look at anything I don't have to look at, and I will not touch you in any way that is not necessary to save your life. But you need to give me permission, right now." She looked at him for a long moment, this rough mountain man with his wild beard and his scarred hands and his cold blue eyes, and she made her choice. "Save me," she whispered. "Please." He pulled the bowie knife from his belt, the blade flashing in the sunlight. With quick, precise movements, he cut the fabric of her habit from the hem up to the wound, maybe 12 inches, exposing her leg. Pale skin, smooth and unmarked, except for the 2 dark puncture wounds and the swelling around them. The flesh was already discolored red, turning to purple. The venom spreading. He had seen this before, had treated it before. The Ute people had taught him. Suck the venom out, spit it away. Apply herbal poultice. Immobilize the limb. Simple in theory, difficult in practice, dangerous. If he had any cuts in his mouth, any sores, the venom could enter his bloodstream. He could die trying to save her. But he had no cuts. His mouth was clean. He lowered his head to her thigh, placed his mouth over the wound, and sucked hard. The venom filled his mouth, bitter and metallic, mixed with blood. He turned his head and spat it onto the ground, a thick, dark stream. Sucked again, spat again. 4 times 5, until no more venom came, until only blood flowed from the punctures. The woman moaned a sound of pain and humiliation and desperation. He did not look at her face, did not want to see whatever was written there. He focused on the work. He pulled the leather pouch from his belt, the one he always carried, the one filled with dried herbs, yarrow for bleeding, echinacea for infection, plantain for swelling. He took a handful of each, chewed them into a paste, his jaw working the taste bitter and earthy. He spat the paste onto his hand, then pressed it against the wound, covering the punctures, packing it tight. From the pouch he pulled a strip of clean linen, wound it around her thigh, tied it off. Not too tight. Blood needed to flow, but tight enough to slow the venom's spread toward her heart. He sat back on his heels, looked at her. Her eyes were half closed, her breathing shallow. Shock blood loss venom. She needed rest. She needed a doctor. But out here there were no doctors. There was only him. He started to tell her that she would be all right, that she just needed to rest, that he would carry her back to town. But before he could speak, he heard it. The sound of a wagon. Horses. Voices. He turned his head, saw them emerging from the trees maybe 100 yards away. A woman driving a man beside her. Both of them staring. Both of them seeing what they thought they were seeing. A mountain man kneeling between a nun's legs, her skirts torn open, blood everywhere, her eyes closed. The woman screamed. The man shouted something, a curse or a prayer, Ethan could not tell which. Ethan stood, raised his hands, tried to call out an explanation. Wait! Listen, she was bitten by a snake, I was helping her. But they did not wait, did not listen. The woman whipped the horses. The wagon lurched forward, racing away down the trail back toward town, back to Silverton, back to the marshal. Ethan looked down at the nun, saw that she was watching him, her green eyes filled with understanding and sorrow. "They think you hurt me," she whispered. "I know. They will come for you. I know. You should run." He looked at her. This woman he had just saved, this stranger who now held his life in her hands, and shook his head. "No, ma'am. I don't run from the truth. Never have. Never will." He bent down, scooped her up in his arms, cradling her against his chest. She weighed maybe 120 pounds light for a woman her height. He could carry her. He had carried heavier loads farther distances. He started walking back toward the trail, back toward Silverton, back toward whatever justice or injustice waited for him there. Helen Pritchard drove the wagon into Silverton like the devil himself was chasing her. The horses lathered and blowing the wheels, bouncing over ruts hard enough to crack axles. Beside her, Jacob Flynn clung to the seat, his face white, his mouth moving in silent prayer. They pulled up in front of the marshal's office, a squat stone building on the main street, and both of them tumbled out shouting, "Marshal Dawson! Marshal, you need to come quick!" The door opened, and Marshal Grant Dawson stepped out into the afternoon sun. 53 years old, tall and lean, gray hair, cut short, gray beard, trimmed close to his jaw. He wore a black suit, a white shirt, a black string tie, and a star-shaped badge pinned to his vest. On his hip, a Colt Peacemaker polished and loaded. "Mrs. Pritchard, what is the meaning of this commotion?" Helen. Pritchard was 40 years old, a widow, her husband dead 2 years in a mining accident. She was known in Silverton as a respectable woman, devout, honest, perhaps a bit prone to gossip, but never malicious. Now she stood in the street, trembling, her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide. "We saw something terrible, Marshal, something awful." "Tell me." She hesitated, glanced at Flynn, then back at Dawson. "It was that mountain man, Ethan Wolfe. He was attacking Sister Kate. We saw him. He was on top of her. Her dress was torn. There was blood." A crowd was gathering now, drawn by the noise, by the word attack, by the mention of a nun. 20 people, 30 more coming. Miners in work clothes, shopkeepers in aprons, women with children on their hips, all of them listening. Dawson felt something cold and sharp twist in his chest. Ethan Wolfe, the hermit, the man who had lived in these mountains for over 2 decades, refusing to come down, refusing to share his knowledge, refusing to help. The man who could have saved Lucas, his son, his boy, dead 8 years now. Dead from a rattlesnake bite because his father did not know how to save him, because there was no one to teach him, because the mountain men hoarded their survival skills like dragons hoarded gold. And now Wolf had attacked a nun. Dawson felt the old rage rising, the rage he had learned to control, to channel, to hide behind the badge and the law. But it was there, always there, waiting. Where did this happen? Up past Cascade Creek, in the high meadows. And you're certain it was Wolf? I've seen him before, Marshal. That beard, that wild look. It was him. Flynn nodded. It was him, no doubt. Dawson turned to the crowd. Deputy Turner, get 6 men. We ride immediately. A young man stepped forward. Luke Turner, 29 years old, clean-shaven, earnest. Marshal, should we not wait for more information? Perhaps there's an explanation. The explanation is clear. Deputy, Wolf attacked a woman of God. We will arrest him, and he will stand trial. That is the law. But the crowd was already murmuring, the word attack spreading, growing, mutating into something darker. Rape, violation, desecration. The mountain man had raped a nun. Someone shouted, hang him. Someone else, string him up. Dawson raised his hand, and the crowd quieted. There will be no vigilante justice in my town. Wolf will be arrested. He will stand trial, and if found guilty, he will hang. But it will be done according to law. Do you understand? The crowd grumbled, but nodded. Dawson turned back to Turner. Get the men. We leave in 10 minutes. But even as he gave the order, even as he prepared to ride out and bring Ethan Wolf to justice, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered a question he did not want to hear. What if you're wrong? He pushed it away. 8 years of certainty could not be undone by one moment's doubt. Lucas was dead. Someone had to pay. And Ethan Wolf, whether guilty of this crime or simply guilty of living while good people died, would do. Ethan carried Kate Bennett into the courtyard of Our Lady of Sorrows Convent just as the sun began its slide toward the western peaks. His arms ached, his back screamed, but he had not stopped, had not rested, had walked the 2 miles from the clearing without pause. She had drifted in and out of consciousness, murmuring words he could not understand. Prayers, maybe, or confessions, or just the fever dreams of a woman poisoned. He called out as he approached the heavy wooden door. Hello, I need help. Someone, please. The door opened and an older woman in a nun's habit appeared, her face lined but her eyes sharp. She took one look at Ethan, at the woman in his arms, and her expression shifted from suspicion to alarm. Sister Kate. What happened? Snakebite, rattler. I did what I could, but she needs care. Bring her inside, quickly. Ethan followed the older woman through a dim corridor into a small room with a narrow bed. He laid Kate down, gently stepped back, felt the sudden absence of her weight like a loss. The older woman, Mother Grace Walsh, examined the wound, saw the herbal poultice, the careful bandaging, looked up at Ethan with new eyes. You know medicine. Learned from the Ute, 20 years ago. You saved her life. Maybe. Time will tell. 2 more nuns appeared, younger, their faces frightened. Grace turned to them. Sister Agnes, fetch water and clean linens. Sister Mary, prepare willow bark tea. Move quickly. They scattered. Grace turned back to Ethan. What is your name? Ethan Wolf. You're the mountain man, the hermit. I am. Thank you, Mr. Wolf. You will be blessed for this. Ethan shook his head. I don't need blessings, ma'am. I need you to understand something. 2 people saw me with Sister Kate. They saw me kneeling over her, her dress torn blood on the ground. They did not see the snake. They did not understand. They think I hurt her. Grace's face hardened. They think you attacked her. Yes. And they've gone to the marshal. Yes. Then you should leave. Go back to your mountain. Run. I will explain what happened. Ethan looked at her, this old woman with her fierce eyes and her steady voice, and felt something like respect, but he shook his head. If I run, I look guilty. I will stay. I will face whatever comes. They will arrest you, possibly hang you. Then they will arrest me, but I will not run from the truth. Grace studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Very well. But know this, Mr. Wolf. If they try to hang you, I will testify. I will tell them what I saw here. A man who saved a life, not a man who harmed one. Thank you. He turned to leave, but Kate's voice stopped him, weak, barely audible. Mr. Wolf? He looked back. She was awake, her green eyes open, fixed on him. Thank you. You saved me. You're welcome, sister. They won't believe you. Not at first. Then we will make them believe. How? She closed her eyes, a small smile on her lips. By telling the truth, again and again, until they hear it. He left the convent, stepped out into the street, and saw them coming. 6 men on horseback, led by a tall man in a black suit and a marshal's badge. Ethan did not run, did not reach for his rifle. He simply stood there, waiting. Marshal Dawson reined in his horse, looked down at Ethan with eyes like flint. Ethan Wolf. Yes. You're under arrest for the assault and attempted violation of Sister Kate Bennett. I did no such thing. I saved her life. She was bitten by a snake. That's not what the witnesses say. Then the witnesses are mistaken. Dawson dismounted, pulled iron shackles from a saddlebag, approached Ethan. You'll have a chance to tell your story at trial. Judge Hart is coming from Denver, but until then, you're in my custody. Ethan did not resist as Dawson clamped the shackles around his wrists. He looked at the crowd that had gathered. 50 people, maybe more. Their faces a mix of curiosity and anger and fear. He saw Mrs. Pritchard there, saw her look away when their eyes met. Saw Mr. Flynn standing with his arms crossed, his jaw set. And he saw at the back of the crowd a boy, maybe 12 years old, skinny with brown hair and wide eyes. The boy was staring at him, not with fear or anger, but with something else, recognition maybe, or understanding. Their eyes met for just a moment. Then the boy turned and slipped away into the shadows between buildings. Ethan was hauled onto a horse, his hands bound, and led through the streets of Silverton toward the jail. People shouted at him, "Savage, monster, hang him." But he did not respond, did not even look at them. He kept his eyes forward, his face expressionless, and thought about the truth, how it was simple, how it was clear, how it did not matter at all if no one was willing to hear it. The jail was a stone building at the edge of town. 3 cells, a small office. Dawson shoved Ethan into the middle cell, removed the shackles, locked the door with a heavy iron key. You'll stay here until trial. 3 days from now. Judge Hart arrives tomorrow. And if I'm found guilty, then you hang. Dawson turned to leave, but Ethan called after him. Marshal, why are you so eager to see me hang? Dawson stopped, his back to Ethan, his shoulders tense. Because men like you killed my son. I never met your son. You didn't have to meet him. You just had to share what you know, the skills you hoard, the medicine you keep to yourself. If you mountain men would come down from your peaks and teach people how to survive, my boy would still be alive. Ethan gripped the bars, his knuckles white. What happened to your son? Dawson turned, and Ethan saw the rage in his eyes. The grief twisted into something sharp and poisonous. Rattlesnake. 8 years ago. I watched him die, screaming, begging me to help him, and I couldn't. I didn't know how. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. There was a man, on the ridge, watching. I saw him, just standing there, watching my boy die. And then he turned and walked away. Didn't help, didn't even try, just walked away. And you think that was me? I know it was you. Ethan shook his head. I'm sorry for your loss, Marshal, but it wasn't me. September 1868. I was in Wyoming Territory, trapping with the Shoshone. Didn't return to Colorado until November. Dawson's face went white, then red, then white again. You're lying. I'm not, and somewhere inside you know I'm not. But you needed someone to blame, someone to hate, so the pain would have a face. For a moment something flickered in Dawson's eyes. Doubt, maybe, or fear. But then the rage returned harder than before. "You're guilty, Wolf. Maybe not of what those witnesses think they saw, but guilty all the same." He walked out, slammed the door, left Ethan alone in the cold stone cell with nothing but the truth and the doubt and the ghosts. Night fell over Silverton, and in his cell Ethan Wolfe sat on the hard wooden bench and thought about Mary's letter still unopened after all these years, still waiting in the pouch on his cabin shelf. Maybe it was time, but not tonight. Tonight he would wait for dawn, wait for the trial, wait for whatever came next. And somewhere in the darkness outside, a boy with a drawing in his pocket made a decision that would change everything. The night after Ethan Wolfe's arrest, Kate Bennett woke in darkness, her leg throbbing with a pain that felt like fire crawling through her veins. The fever had broken, but the wound still burned. Sister Agnes had changed the bandages twice already, marveling at the herbal poultice the mountain man had applied. Whatever he'd used, it was working. The swelling had stopped spreading. The discoloration was fading from angry purple to a dull bruise. But Kate's pain was not only physical. Mother Grace sat beside the narrow bed holding Kate's hand, her weathered fingers wrapped around Kate's pale ones. The older woman had been there for hours praying silently, waiting for Kate to wake. "Mother," Kate whispered, "what will happen to him, to Mr. Wolfe?" Grace's face was drawn with worry, the lines deeper in the candlelight. "He will stand trial in 3 days. Judge Hart is coming from Denver. They may find him guilty." "Yes." "Because of what Mrs. Pritchard thinks she saw." "Yes." Kate pushed herself up on her elbows, wincing as the movement sent fresh pain shooting through her leg. "But we know the truth. He saved me. We do know the truth, and we will testify to it." Kate shook her head, frustration making her voice sharp. "The trial is 3 days away. By then the town will have decided. They'll have made up their minds. They'll hang him, and our testimony won't matter." "What are you suggesting, child?" "I don't know." Kate looked down at her hands, at the scar on her wrist that she'd carried for 7 years, a reminder of the last time she'd run from something instead of standing for what was right. "But I know I cannot let an innocent man die because of me." Grace squeezed her hand. "Rest now. We will think of something." But Kate could not rest. She lay in the darkness, staring at the wooden beams of the ceiling, listening to the wind whistle through the eaves. She thought about Ethan Wolfe, about his rough hands that had touched her with such careful gentleness, about his eyes cold and blue that had held no desire, no cruelty, only purpose, about the way he had asked her permission before cutting her habit, the way he had given her a choice in a moment when she had no power. That was not the action of a man who attacked women. That was the action of a man who respected them. She thought about her vows, poverty, chastity, obedience. She had not broken them, not technically, but lying here remembering the feel of his hands on her skin, the warmth of his breath, the weight of him when he'd carried her, she knew something had shifted. Some wall inside her had cracked. For the first time in 7 years, she had felt alive, fully, terrifyingly alive. Not watching life from behind stone walls, but living it. Even in pain, even in fear, even facing death, she had felt more real in those moments with Ethan Wolfe than she had in 7 years of prayers and silence. Footsteps in the corridor, soft, hesitant. The door opened and a figure slipped into the room. Not Mother Grace, someone else. Father Benjamin Hayes stood in the doorway, an old man in a black cassock, his white hair wild, his eyes red-rimmed from sleeplessness or tears or both. "Sister Kate, may I speak with you?" She nodded, and he pulled a chair close to the bed, sat down heavily, his hands folded in his lap. "I was in the mountains yesterday," he said without preamble. "I saw what happened." Kate's heart leapt. "You saw the snake." "I saw the snake bite you. I saw Mr. Wolfe run to help. I saw him save your life. I saw everything." "Then you must testify. You must tell the marshal." Hayes looked down at his hands. "I will testify, but I fear it won't be enough. Marshal Dawson wants Mr. Wolf to hang. He's wanted it for 8 years ever since his son died. Then what can we do?" The old priest reached into his cassock and pulled out a ring of iron keys. They jangled softly in the silence. "I have these. They open the cells in the jail." Kate stared at the keys, understanding slowly, horrifyingly dawning. "You want to break him out?" "I want to save an innocent man." "Father, if we're caught, we'll go to prison. Both of us." Hayes met her eyes, and in them she saw something she recognized. Guilt, old and deep and corrosive. 30 years ago," he said quietly, "I stayed silent when an innocent man was accused. I was a young priest in Pennsylvania. I witnessed a murder. I knew who the killer was. A judge, a powerful man, and I was afraid of what would happen if I spoke. So I said nothing, and I watched them hang an innocent man for that crime." His voice broke. "I've carried that guilt every day for 30 years. I came to Colorado to escape it." "But you cannot escape guilt, Sister Kate. It follows you like a shadow. It eats you from the inside." He held up the keys. "When I saw what was happening to Mr. Wolf, I knew I had a choice. Stay silent again and live with more blood on my hands, or speak up and finally do the right thing, even if it costs me everything." Kate looked at the keys, at the old priest's trembling hands, at the desperation in his eyes. She thought about her vows, about the rules she had followed for 7 years, about the wall she had built around herself, brick by brick, prayer by prayer, keeping the world at bay. And she thought about Ethan Wolf alone in a cell, waiting for a justice that would never come. She pushed back the blankets, ignoring the pain that shot through her leg as she swung her feet to the floor. "When do we go?" Hayes looked at her with something like wonder. "Tonight, before the guard changes, before anyone realizes what we're doing." Kate stood testing her weight on her injured leg. It held, barely. "I'll need a cloak, and I'll need help walking." Hayes smiled a sad, weary smile. "You're braver than I was, Sister Kate." "I'm terrified, Father, but I'm also tired of hiding behind these walls." "Then let us go. Let us do this terrible, necessary thing." They moved through the convent like ghosts, silent, purposeful. Mother Grace met them at the door, holding a dark cloak. She draped it over Kate's shoulders, fastened it at her throat. "Mother, I'm sorry." Grace shook her head. "Don't be sorry, child. Be brave, and remember what Augustine said. An unjust law is no law at all. Thank you. Go, before I lose my courage and stop you." Kate and Father Hayes slipped out into the night, into the cold mountain air, into the darkness that would either save them or destroy them. The jail was quiet. One guard sat at the desk, a deputy named Miller Young, an inexperienced fighting sleep. Father Hayes had given him a flask of whiskey earlier in the evening. Whiskey laced with laudanum, just enough to make him drowsy, to make him careless. Miller's head nodded, jerked up, nodded again. His eyes closed. Father Hayes reached for the door handle, turned it slowly, praying it would not squeak. It did not. They slipped inside. Miller snored softly in his chair. Hayes took the keys, moved down the corridor past 2 empty cells to the middle one where Ethan Wolf sat on a hard wooden bench, his head bowed. "Mr. Wolf." Ethan looked up, saw the old priest, saw the nun behind him, saw the keys. His eyes widened. "What are you doing?" "Saving your life." "This is madness. If you're caught, you'll go to prison. Both of you." Kate stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear that made her hands shake. "Then we'll go to prison, but we will not let you hang for a crime you didn't commit." Ethan stood, walked to the bars, looked at her. In the dim light, his face was all sharp angles and shadow. "Sister, you barely know me. Why would you risk everything? Because you saved me, and because it's the right thing to do, and because I'm tired of hiding behind rules when the truth is standing right in front of me." Hayes unlocked the cell, swung the door open. "Come, we don't have much time." Ethan hesitated, looked at Kate, at the old priest at the open door. He could walk out, could run, could disappear back into the mountains where no one would ever find him. But if he did, these two would pay the price, and the truth would die in this cell. "Where do I go?" Hayes spoke quickly, urgently. "Back to the mountains. Find the boy." "What boy?" "The boy who was watching from the meadow. I saw him. He saw everything. His name is Tommy Reed. He lives with his grandmother Ann near Cascade Creek. Find him. Bring him back to testify. And if he won't come, then we'll think of something else. But right now, you need to leave before Miller wakes." Ethan stepped out of the cell, looked at Kate. "Thank you. You already said that." "It bears repeating." Kate smiled despite everything. "Then you're welcome. Now go, and come back with the truth." Ethan paused at the door, turned back. "Sister, what's your name? Your real name?" She blinked, surprised. In all of this they had never properly introduced themselves. "Kate. Kate Bennett." "Ethan Wolfe." He touched 2 fingers to his forehead in a gesture that might have been a salute or a farewell. Then he was gone, slipping out into the night, into the mountains he knew, like the lines on his own hands. Hayes locked the empty cell, placed the keys back on Miller's desk. He took Kate's arm, and they walked out together, moving slowly because of her injured leg, heading back toward the convent. At the door, Kate turned to him. "What happens now? Now we pray, and we wait, and we prepare to face the consequences." "Are you afraid?" "Terrified." Hayes looked up at the stars scattered across the black sky like broken glass. "But also strangely at peace. I've spent 30 years running from one moment of cowardice. Tonight I faced it. That's worth whatever comes next." Kate squeezed his hand. Inside the convent she limped back to her room, lay down on her bed, stared at the ceiling. Outside the wind picked up moaning through the eaves, and somewhere far above in the high peaks a wolf howled. She thought about Ethan Wolfe running through the darkness, searching for a boy who might save him. She thought about the vows she had taken, the vows she had just broken, the vows she might break again if given the chance. And she wondered for the first time in 7 years if freedom and faith could exist in the same heart, or if one always had to die so the other could live. She closed her eyes and prayed, not for forgiveness, not for guidance, but for courage. Because tomorrow the marshal would discover the empty cell, and tomorrow the truth would have to fight for its life. Dawn broke cold and gray over Silverton, the kind of morning that promised nothing but hard truths and harder choices. Deputy Miller woke with a pounding headache and a mouth that tasted like old leather. He stumbled to his feet, looked toward the cells, and felt his heart stop. The middle one was empty. The door hung open. Ethan Wolfe was gone. Miller stood there for a full 10 seconds, his whiskey-fogged brain trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Then he ran to the door, threw it open, and shouted into the street. "Marshal Dawson! Marshal, he's escaped! Wolfe's escaped!" Within minutes the entire town knew. Within an hour, Dawson had assembled a posse of 8 men, all of them armed, all of them angry. The mountain man had made fools of them all, had somehow slipped his chains and vanished into the wilderness like smoke. But Dawson was no fool. He knew these mountains, knew that a man like Wolfe would not run far, would not leave the territory without clearing his name, would go looking for proof, for witnesses, for anything that could save him. And Dawson knew exactly where that proof lived. Tommy Reed, the boy who drew pictures, the boy who spent his days in the high meadows watching the world and sketching it in charcoal. The boy who had been in those mountains 4 days ago, who might have seen something, who might know the truth. Dawson turned to his men, his face hard. "We ride north, to the Reed cabin. If Wolfe is smart, that's where he'll go." But as they mounted their horses, Dawson felt something twist in his chest. Not just rage, not just the old grief, something else, something that might have been doubt. What if he was wrong? What if Wolfe really had saved Sister Kate? What if the witnesses had misunderstood? He pushed the thought away. 8 years of certainty could not be undone by one night's doubt. Lucas was dead. Someone had to pay. And Wolfe, whether guilty of this crime or simply guilty of living while good people died, would do. They rode out at sunrise, 8 men with rifles and rope hunting a ghost. Ethan had been running for 6 hours by the time the sun cleared the eastern peaks. Running was perhaps the wrong word. A man of 46 did not run through mountain terrain at night. He moved fast, efficient, conserving energy, reading the land by starlight and memory. He knew these trails the way a sailor knows the sea, by feel and instinct and 25 years of solitude. The Reed cabin was 5 miles north of Silverton, tucked into a narrow valley where Cascade Creek tumbled down from the high country. Ann Reed was 72 years old, a widow these past 10 years, raising her grandson alone after her daughter died in childbirth and the father disappeared into the mines and never came back out. Tommy was 12 now. Smart as a whip, curious as a cat, always drawing, always watching. Ethan had seen the boy in the meadows before, had even spoken to him once or twice. Brief exchanges about the weather, about where the elk were feeding, about nothing that mattered. The boy had never seemed afraid of him, which was unusual. Most children took one look at Ethan's wild appearance and ran. But Tommy just watched with those sharp eyes and asked questions. "What's that plant yarrow? Good for stopping bleeding. And that one arnica, for bruises and swelling." The boy would nod, pull out his little notebook, sketch the plant with quick, precise strokes. Then he would thank Ethan and go back to watching the world. Had he been watching 4 days ago? Had he seen Kate fall? Had he seen the snake? Had he seen Ethan save her? Ethan prayed that he had. As he approached the Reed property, the eastern sky turning from gray to gold, he slowed, circled wide, made sure no one had gotten there first. The cabin stood quiet, smoke rising from the chimney. One horse in the small corral, no sign of trouble. He approached from the tree line, rifle in hand, knocked on the rough wooden door. "Mrs. Reed, it's Ethan Wolfe. I need to speak with you and Tommy." Silence. Then the sound of a bolt being drawn back. The door opened a crack and Ann Reed's weathered face appeared suspicious and wary. "Mr. Wolfe, I heard you were in jail." "I was. But I'm innocent, Mrs. Reed. And I think Tommy might be able to prove it." The door opened wider. Ann stood there in a simple gray dress, her white hair pulled back in a severe bun, a shotgun in her gnarled hands. Not pointing at him exactly, but not pointing away either. "Tommy's not here." Ethan's heart sank. "Where is he?" "Gone to town. To see Sister Kate. He heard she was hurt." "When did he leave?" "An hour ago, maybe less. On foot." "On foot? Then I can catch him." Ethan turned to go, but Ann called after him. "Mr. Wolfe, I need you to know something." "Tommy came home 4 days ago, excited as I've ever seen him. Said he saw something remarkable in the high meadows. Drew a picture of it. Said a nun got bit by a snake and a mountain man saved her." "Where's the picture?" "Took it with him. Said he wanted to show Sister Kate." Ethan felt hope flare in his chest. "Mrs. Reed, I didn't hurt Sister Kate. A rattlesnake bit her. I saved her life. And I think Tommy saw it happen. I need him to tell the truth." Ann studied him for a long moment, then lowered the shotgun. "I believe you, Mr. Wolfe." Relief washed through him. "Thank you. But you should know something else. Sheriff Dawson came here yesterday. Said if Tommy testifies for you, he'll accuse the boy of trespassing on private land. Said he'll send him to juvenile prison in Denver." Rage flooded through Ethan, hot and clean. "He threatened a child." Ann's face hardened. "He's a desperate man, Mr. Wolfe. Desperate men do terrible things." "Did Tommy agree to stay silent?" Ann smiled, fierce and proud. "My grandson is many things, but a coward ain't one of them. He told the sheriff to go to hell, used those exact words, then told him that lies might win in the short term, but truth always wins in the end." Ethan felt something like respect bloom in his chest. "That's a brave boy you've raised, Mrs. Reed." "He's his mother's son. She never backed down from anything either." Ethan touched his hat, turned, and ran back down the trail toward Silverton, toward a 12-year-old boy who held his life in small, ink-stained hands. Tommy Reed walked the road to Silverton with his drawing tucked carefully in his coat pocket and a sense of purpose burning in his chest. He was 12 years old, but he understood justice, understood that sometimes the truth needed a voice, even a small one, even a voice that cracked when he got nervous. He had seen what happened in that meadow. had been gathering kindling for his grandmother when he heard the scream, had run toward the sound, seen Sister Kate fall, seen the snake strike, seen the mountain man appear and save her, had watched from a distance, sketching it all with quick, precise strokes capturing every detail. And then he had seen the wagon arrive, had seen the two people misunderstand, had seen them right away, had known with the terrible clarity of childhood that something bad was about to happen. For 3 days he had wrestled with what to do. His grandmother had said, "Stay out of it. Mountain men and nuns and marshals were business for adults, not boys." But Tommy could not shake the image from his mind. The mountain man's careful hands, the nun's grateful eyes, the truth clear and simple as sunlight. Then yesterday the marshal had come, had threatened him, and something in Tommy had broken and reformed harder, sharper. You don't threaten someone for telling the truth. That's what bullies do. And Tommy had learned long ago not to bow to bullies. So he walked to Silverton, drawing in his pocket truth in his heart, and prayed that someone would listen. He was halfway to town when he heard horses behind him. He turned, saw 8 riders, saw the marshal in the lead, and knew immediately that this was trouble. Marshal Dawson reined in his horse, looked down at the boy with eyes like winter. "Tommy Reed." Tommy's mouth went dry. "Marshal, where are you going?" "To see Sister Kate. I heard she was hurt." "And what business is that of yours?" "I go to her school. She's my teacher." Dawson dismounted, walked toward Tommy with slow, deliberate steps. "What's in your pocket, boy?" Tommy's hand instinctively moved to protect the drawing. "Nothing, sir." "Don't lie to me. Show me." Tommy hesitated, then with shaking hands pulled out the folded paper. Dawson snatched it unfolded. It stared at the image. His face went pale, then red, then pale again. The drawing was remarkably detailed, the snake coiled and striking, Sister Kate on the ground, the mountain man kneeling, his mouth clearly pressed to her leg, extracting venom. The scene was unmistakable, undeniable. "Where did you get this?" "I drew it 4 days ago, in the high meadows. You were spying. I was gathering wood. I heard a scream. I went to help." Dawson crumpled the paper in his fist. "This is a lie, a child's fantasy." Tommy's voice came out stronger than he felt. "It's the truth. I saw everything. The snake, the mountain man saving Sister Kate, everything." The other riders had dismounted now, forming a loose circle around Tommy. The boy felt fear crawl up his spine, but he stood his ground. His grandmother had raised him better than to run. Dawson leaned down, brought his face close to Tommy's. "Listen to me, boy. That mountain man is a criminal. He attacked Sister Kate, and if you testify otherwise, I will make sure you regret it. Do you understand?" Tommy met his eyes. "I understand you're trying to hang an innocent man, and I won't let you." The words hung in the air. Several of the deputies shifted uncomfortably. One of them, Luke Turner, stepped forward. "Marshal, he's just a kid. Let him go." Dawson rounded on Turner. "He's a witness, a hostile witness. He comes with us." "You can't arrest a child for telling the truth." "Watch me." Dawson grabbed Tommy's arm, started to drag him toward the horses. The boy struggled, tried to pull away, and then from the tree line a voice rang out, cold, clear, dangerous. "Let him go, Dawson." Everyone turned. Ethan Wolfe stepped out of the shadows, rifle raised, aimed directly at the marshal's chest, 40 yards away. An easy shot for a man of his skill. "Wolfe, I should have known you'd show up. I said let him go. Or what, you'll shoot me in front of 8 witnesses that'll prove your innocence." Ethan took 3 steps forward, rifle steady. "I'll shoot you because you're threatening a child. That's reason enough." One of the deputies spoke up. "He's not threatening anyone. We're just talking." Ethan looked at Tommy, saw the fear in the boy's eyes, the anger, the determination, saw the crumpled paper in Dawson's fist, saw everything he needed to see. Tommy walked toward me, slowly. Tommy tried, but Dawson's grip tightened. The boy gasped in pain. Ethan's finger tightened on the trigger. "Last chance, Marshal." And then another voice, this one from the south, clear and commanding. "That is enough. All of you." Everyone turned again. 2 horses approached. 2 riders. Kate Bennett and Mother Grace Walsh. Kate's face was pale, her movements careful, but her eyes blazed with fury. She dismounted, limped toward the circle of men. Marshal Dawson, release that child immediately. Sister Kate, you should be resting. And you should be upholding the law, not terrorizing children. Dawson's jaw clenched. This boy has evidence. He's coming with me. He is coming with me. And Mr. Wolf is coming with me. And we are all going back to Silverton together, where there will be a proper trial, with proper witnesses, and the truth will be heard, all of it. She turned to Ethan. Mr. Wolf, lower your rifle. Sister, I don't think that's wise. Lower it. Trust me. Ethan hesitated, then slowly lowered the rifle. Dawson immediately released Tommy. The boy ran to Kate's side. She placed a protective hand on his shoulder. Mother Grace rode forward, her voice ringing with authority. Marshal Dawson, I have known you for 15 years. You are a good man, but grief has twisted you. Your son's death was not Mr. Wolf's fault. It was not anyone's fault. It was a tragedy. Her voice softened. But if you hang an innocent man to ease your pain, you will become something worse than a man who failed to save his son. You will become a murderer. Is that the legacy you want to leave? Dawson stood frozen, his face a mask of warring emotions, rage and grief and shame and something that might have been hope. He looked at Ethan, at Kate, at Tommy, at the drawing in his hand. Slowly he unfolded the paper, smoothed it out, stared at the image. The detail was remarkable, every line precise. The snake coiled and striking, Kate on the ground, Ethan kneeling, his mouth clearly, unmistakably pressed to her leg, extracting venom. Dawson's hand shook. This is what happened. Tommy stepped forward, his voice small but steady. Yes, sir. That's exactly what happened. I saw it all. Mr. Wolf didn't hurt Sister Kate. He saved her. For a long moment no one moved. The wind whispered through the pines. A hawk circled overhead, wings spread against the blue. Then slowly Dawson lowered his head. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. Lucas died 8 years ago. Rattlesnake bite. I didn't know what to do. I watched my boy die screaming, and I couldn't help him. His voice broke. And I've hated every mountain man since, because they knew how to save him. And they weren't there. He paused. But it wasn't their fault. It wasn't anyone's fault. It was just bad luck. Just the cruelty of a world that doesn't care how much we love our children. He looked at Ethan. I'm sorry. I've been hunting the wrong man. Ethan lowered his rifle completely. I lost my son too, Marshal. Scarlet fever, 11 years ago. I know your pain, but pain doesn't give us the right to hurt others. Dawson nodded slowly. What happens now? Kate spoke, her voice firm. Now we go back. We have a trial. We tell the truth, and we let justice decide. They rode back to Silverton together, an unlikely company. Ethan and Kate rode side by side, not speaking, but acutely aware of each other's presence. Tommy rode with Mother Grace, chattering nervously about his drawing, about what he had seen, about whether anyone would believe him. Marshal Dawson rode at the rear alone, his deputies giving him space. Luke Turner rode beside Ethan for a while, then spoke quietly. Mr. Wolf, I want to apologize. I should have questioned the arrest, should have asked for more evidence. You were following orders. I don't fault you for that. Still, I knew something didn't feel right, but I ignored my instincts. Then don't ignore them next time. Turner nodded, fell back. Ethan found himself alone with Kate again. She glanced at him and he at her, and something passed between them, something unspoken but profound. Thank you, he said quietly, for coming after me, for risking everything. You saved my life. I could do no less. You risked more than your life. You risked your vows, your place in the church. Kate was silent for a long moment. I've been thinking about my vows, about what they mean, about whether I took them for the right reasons. She paused. And I think I was hiding, from my father, from the world, from myself. But these past 4 days, I've felt more alive than I have in 7 years, more real. Does that make sense? It makes perfect sense. She looked at him directly, now her green eyes searching his face. "What happens after the trial if you're acquitted?" "I go back to my mountain, I suppose. Live alone again." He met her gaze. "I don't know. Maybe I'm tired of being alone." "What would you do if you weren't alone?" He smiled a rare expression that transformed his weathered face. "I have no idea, but I think I'd like to find out." Kate smiled back, then looked away, her cheeks flushing. They rode on in silence, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not the silence of solitude, but the silence of possibility. As they approached Silverton, they could see the crowd already gathering. Word had spread. The mountain man was returning. The nun who freed him was with him. The marshal had been humiliated. The town was hungry for resolution. Judge Cornelius Hart stood on the courthouse steps, black robes flapping in the wind, his expression grave. He had arrived from Denver that morning expecting a simple trial. Now he faced something far more complex. As the group dismounted, the judge raised his hand. "Marshal Dawson, I understand there have been developments." "Yes, Your Honor. New evidence has come to light." "Then we will hear it, all of it. Court convenes in 1 hour. Everyone involved will testify under oath, and then we will have the truth." The crowd murmured, excited, nervous, uncertain. Ethan stood beside his horse, looking at the faces around him. Some hostile, some curious, some finally beginning to doubt. Kate stood nearby, still in her nun's habit, but something about her had changed. The way she held herself, the way she met people's eyes, as if she had shed some invisible weight and was only now learning to stand straight. Father Hayes appeared at the edge of the crowd, his face lined with exhaustion, but also with something like peace. He caught Kate's eye, nodded once. She nodded back. Mother Grace gathered her sisters, spoke to them quietly. Sister Agnes looked shocked. Sister Mary looked frightened. Sister Rose looked at Kate with something that might have been admiration. Tommy stood with his grandmother, clutching his drawing, his young face serious beyond his years. Ann Reed's hand rested on his shoulder, proud and protective. And Marshal Dawson stood apart, watching it all, the truth finally settling into his bones like winter cold. He had been wrong. For 8 years he had been wrong, and now he would have to stand before this town and admit it. The courthouse doors opened. Judge Hart beckoned them inside. "Come," he said. "Let us have the truth at last." The courthouse was not truly a courthouse, but the town square transformed. Wooden benches arranged in rows facing a raised platform where Judge Cornelius Hart would sit. A smaller platform to the side for witnesses. The whole thing had the temporary makeshift quality of frontier justice, which was exactly what it was. 400 people packed the square, maybe more. Every soul in Silverton who could walk or ride had come to see this, to see justice done or vengeance satisfied, depending on which side of truth they stood. Judge Hart sat at the center of it all, an island of calm in a sea of emotion. 60 years old, with a silver beard that reached his chest and spectacles that caught the morning sun like small mirrors. He had presided over 53 trials in his 30 years on the bench, had sentenced 22 men to hang, 16 to prison, freed 15 who were innocent. He knew the weight of judgment, knew that words spoken in a courtroom could end lives or save them. He did not take that power lightly. The gallows stood at the edge of the square, a reminder of what failure meant. Dawson had ordered it built 3 days ago before the truth emerged. Now it stood empty, waiting a monument to presumption. Ethan sat at the defense table wearing clothes Sam Ridge had loaned him, a clean white shirt, dark trousers, boots that did not smell of elk blood and mountain mud. He looked almost civilized. Almost. But his hands were still scarred, his beard still wild, his eyes still those of a man who had lived alone with grief for too long. No amount of clean clothing could hide what he was. Kate sat in the front row wearing her full habit for what she had decided would be the last time. She had made that decision during the night after hours of prayer in the chapel. If she was going to leave the order, she would do it honestly, not by sneaking away in borrowed clothes. She would wear the veil one last time, testify as Sister Kate, and then walk away as simply Kate, the woman, the teacher, the person she was meant to be. Beside her sat Tommy Reed, clutching his drawing like a talisman. Ann Reed sat on his other side, her gnarled hand on his shoulder, proud and terrified in equal measure. Mother Grace sat behind them, flanked by sisters Agnes, Mary, and Rose. Father Hayes sat at the end of the row, his Bible open to Psalm 37. The righteous will inherit the land and dwell in it forever. Marshal Dawson sat at the prosecution table, but he looked more like a defendant than a prosecutor. His face was gray, his eyes hollow. He had not slept in 3 days, had not eaten much either. The weight of 8 years was crushing him, and everyone could see it. The jury sat to the right of the judge. 12 men chosen from the town, miners, shopkeepers, ranchers, men who worked with their hands and judged with their hearts, men who could be swayed by emotion or reason depending on which argued more persuasively. Right now their faces showed nothing. They were waiting for the evidence to tell them what to think. Judge Hart banged his gavel 3 times. The crowd noise faded to whispers, then to silence. This court is now in session. We are here to determine the truth of charges against Ethan Wolfe, specifically assault and attempted violation of Sister Kate Bennett. His voice carried across the square clear and firm. "Mr. Wolfe, how do you plead?" Ethan stood. His voice was steady, clear. "Not guilty, Your Honor. I saved Sister Kate's life. That is the truth." "Very well. Marshal Dawson, you may call your first witness." Dawson stood slowly. He looked at the judge, at the jury, at the crowd. Then he looked at Ethan, and something broke inside him. Something that had been held together by rage and grief for 8 years finally shattered. "Your Honor, I cannot call any witnesses, because there are none, not honest ones." The crowd erupted. Judge Hart banged his gavel. "Explain yourself, Marshal." Dawson took a breath. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, but in the silence everyone heard. "I was wrong. I arrested Mr. Wolfe based on a misunderstanding. 2 witnesses saw him kneeling over Sister Kate, her clothing torn, blood on the ground. They assumed the worst. But they didn't see the snake. They didn't understand he was performing a medical procedure." He paused, and the next words seemed to be dragged from somewhere deep inside him, somewhere dark and painful. "And I didn't care to find out the truth. I wanted him to be guilty. So I arrested him, and I nearly hanged him for it." More uproar. The judge's gavel came down hard. "Order, order in this court. Marshal Dawson, are you saying you falsely arrested Mr. Wolfe?" "Not falsely, but wrongly. There's a difference." "Explain that difference." Dawson's hands gripped the edge of the table. "I believed he was guilty. I believed the witnesses. But I also wanted to believe them. Because 8 years ago my son died from a rattlesnake bite. And I blamed men like Mr. Wolfe, men who live in the mountains, who know medicine, who could have saved my boy but weren't there." His voice cracked. "But it wasn't just men like him. It was him, specifically. At least I told myself it was." He looked directly at Ethan now. "When Lucas lay dying, I looked up, saw a man on the ridge, watching, not helping, just watching, and then he turned and walked away." Tears ran down his weathered face. "I told myself for 8 years it was Ethan Wolfe, that he saw my boy dying and didn't care, that he could have saved Lucas but chose not to. But I don't know if it was really him, or if grief made me see what I needed to see, someone to blame, someone to hate, so the pain would have a face." The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved. No one breathed. Ethan stood, his voice gentle. "Marshal, where did Lucas die?" "What ridge?" "Eagles Point, north of Cascade Creek. September 1868. "Yes." Ethan closed his eyes, thinking. "I wasn't there. September 68 I was in Wyoming Territory, trapping with the Shoshone. Didn't return to Colorado until November." He paused. "But I know who was there. Jack Morrison, old mountain man, died 2 years ago. White beard, walked with a limp. From a distance we might look similar." Dawson's legs seemed to give out. He sank into his chair, his face in his hands. 8 years. I hunted the wrong man for 8 years. Ethan walked over to him, knelt beside his chair. "I forgive you, and I hope someday you can forgive yourself. Your boy's death was not my fault, But it wasn't your fault either. Sometimes people die and there's no one to blame, just the cruelty of a world that doesn't care how much we love." Judge Hart cleared his throat, his own eyes wet. "Gentlemen, please be seated." They stood, returned to their places. The judge addressed the jury. "You have heard the marshal's confession, but we will hear all testimony before you deliberate. Sister Kate, please approach the stand." Kate stood, walked to the witness stand with only a slight limp. The wound had healed well thanks to Ethan's medicine and Sister Agnes's care. She placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Judge Hart's voice was gentle. "Sister Kate, I know this is difficult, but we need you to tell us exactly what happened 4 days ago, in your own words. Take your time." Kate took a breath, looked out at the crowd, saw faces she knew, children she had taught, parents who had trusted her with their sons and daughters. She saw skepticism, sympathy, curiosity. She saw everything except judgment, which was more than she had expected. "Your Honor, gentlemen of the jury people of Silverton, 4 days ago I went into the mountains to collect wildflowers for my students. I have done this many times. The mountains are beautiful and the children love learning about God's creation through the flowers and plants that grow there." She paused, gathering her thoughts. The courthouse was silent except for the wind moving through the square. "I was in a meadow at approximately 10,000 feet. I reached for a columbine flower, slipped on wet moss, and fell. As I lay on the ground I heard a sound I will never forget, the rattle of a prairie rattlesnake." Several people in the crowd gasped. Snakes were common enough in the mountains, but hearing about one up close made it real, made it terrifying. "The snake was coiled beside me. I tried to move away, but I startled it. It struck me here." She gestured to her upper thigh. "High on my left leg. The pain was immediate and intense. I knew I was dying. I screamed for help, but I was alone, or so I thought." She looked at Ethan. He was watching her, his expression unreadable. "Then I heard footsteps. A man appeared. I had never seen him before. He looked like someone who had lived in the wilderness for a long time. Rough, wild. I was frightened." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "But he knelt beside me and said, 'Ma'am, you've been bitten. I can help you or I can watch you die. Choose.'" Judge Hart interrupted. "What did you choose, Sister Kate?" "I chose life." "And what happened next?" Kate's voice grew stronger. "He explained that the bite was beneath my habit, that to extract the venom he would need to cut the fabric and touch my leg. He asked my permission. He gave me his word that he would do nothing beyond what was medically necessary. And I believed him." "Why did you believe him?" Kate paused, searching for the right words. "Because there was no lust in his eyes, no cruelty, just purpose. He was a physician in that moment, not a man looking at a woman, a physician looking at a patient. He gave me a choice. In a moment when I had no power, he gave me power. That is not the action of a man who attacks. That is the action of a man who respects." "And did he keep his word?" "He did. He cut only what was necessary. He extracted the venom by suction, which I have since learned is a dangerous procedure for the rescuer. He applied herbal medicine. He bandaged the wound. Then he carried me back to the convent. At no point, and I want to be absolutely clear about this, at no point did he violate me. At no point did he speak disrespectfully. At no point did he do anything except save my life." She looked directly at the jury. "If you hang this man, you hang a hero. You hang someone who risked his own life to save mine. You hang someone who taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right even when you're terrified. He saved my life twice, once from the snake, once from my own fear, and you will have to live with that injustice for the rest of your lives." Judge Hart nodded. "Cross-examination." Dawson stood. "I have no questions, Your Honor. Sister Kate is telling the truth." "You may step down, Sister. Tommy Reed, please approach the stand." Tommy walked to the witness stand on shaking legs. He was 12 years old, and he had never been in a courtroom before, had never sworn an oath on a Bible, had never had 400 people staring at him waiting for him to speak, but his grandmother had raised him to be brave, and he would not fail her now. Judge Hart smiled kindly. "Young man, do you understand what it means to swear an oath?" "Yes, sir. It means I have to tell the truth, the whole truth." "That's right. And do you promise to do that?" "I do, sir." "Good. Now tell us what you saw 4 days ago." Tommy pulled out his drawing, unfolded it carefully. "I was in the high meadows gathering kindling for my grandmother. I heard a scream, a woman's scream. I ran toward the sound." "What did you see?" "I saw Sister Kate on the ground. I saw a snake, a big rattlesnake maybe 3.5 feet long. I saw it bite her. Then I saw it slither away. And then I saw Mr. Wolf. He came running from the trees. He went straight to Sister Kate. He didn't hesitate. He just started helping her." "Can you describe what he did?" Tommy's voice was steady now, growing in confidence. "He cut her dress to reach the bite. He sucked the venom out. He applied medicine. He bandaged her. Then he picked her up and carried her away." Judge Hart leaned forward. "Tommy, this is very important. At any point did you see Mr. Wolf harm Sister Kate?" "No, sir, never. He saved her." "How far away were you?" "About 50 yards, maybe a little more." "Could you see clearly?" "Yes, sir. I have good eyes, and the sun was bright. I could see everything." Judge Hart held up the drawing. "And you drew this immediately after?" "Yes, sir. I always draw what I see, so I don't forget. My mama told me before she died, 'Tommy, the world is full of liars, but a picture don't lie, so draw what you see, always.' And I have." The judge studied the drawing, then passed it to the jury. Each man examined it carefully. Several nodded. One, an older miner with scars on his hands, wiped his eyes. Judge Hart turned back to Tommy. "Young man, you have done a brave thing, coming here, telling the truth, even when powerful people tried to silence you." Tommy glanced at Dawson, then back at the judge. "My grandmother says the truth matters more than being safe. She says if you stay silent when someone needs your voice, you're just as guilty as the person doing wrong." "Your grandmother is a wise woman." "Yes, sir, she is." "You may step down. Mrs. Helen Pritchard, Mr. Jacob Flynn, please approach." Helen and Jacob walked to the stand together. They looked smaller than they had 4 days ago. Smaller and ashamed. They were sworn in together. Judge Hart addressed them both. "You two provided the initial testimony that led to Mr. Wolf's arrest. You said you saw him attacking Sister Kate. Do you still maintain that testimony?" Helen spoke first, her voice shaking. "No, Your Honor. We were wrong. We saw what we thought we saw, but we didn't see the snake. We didn't understand. We judged too quickly." Flynn nodded. "Same here. We saw a man kneeling over a woman, her dress torn, blood everywhere. We assumed the worst, but we didn't stop to check. We didn't ask questions. We just ran." Judge Hart's voice was stern. "Do you understand that your testimony nearly resulted in an innocent man's execution?" Helen began to cry. "Yes. Yes, I understand, and I am so sorry." She turned to Ethan. "Mr. Wolf, I am so sorry." Flynn looked at Ethan. "Sir, I don't know what to say. I was wrong. Dead wrong. If there's anything I can do to make it right." Ethan stood. His voice was quiet but clear. "You can make it right by never doing it again, by never judging a situation before you understand it, by never letting fear turn into accusation." Flynn nodded. "Yes, sir. I swear I won't." Judge Hart dismissed them. They returned to their seats, heads bowed. "Father Benjamin Hayes, please approach." Hayes walked to the stand with the slow, deliberate steps of a man who had lived too long with guilt. He placed his hand on the Bible, swore his oath, sat down heavily. Judge Hart studied him. "Father Hayes, you witnessed the snake bite." "I did, Your Honor. I was in the mountains collecting herbs for medicinal purposes. I saw Sister Kate fall. I saw the snake strike. I saw Mr. Wolf arrive and save her." "Why didn't you come forward immediately?" Hayes looked down at his hands. "Because 30 years ago I made a terrible mistake. I witnessed a crime in Pennsylvania. An innocent man was accused of murder. I knew he was innocent. I saw the real killer. But the killer was a powerful man, a judge, and I was afraid. So I stayed silent. I watched that innocent man hang. The courthouse was silent. Hayes continued, his voice breaking. I have carried that guilt for 30 years. I came to Colorado to escape it, but you cannot escape guilt. It follows you like a shadow. When I saw what was happening to Mr. Wolf, I knew I had a choice. Stay silent again and live with more guilt, or speak up and finally do the right thing. And what did you choose? Hayes looked at Kate, at Mother Grace. I chose to speak, but more than that, I chose to act. I helped Mr. Wolf escape from jail so he could find the witness he needed. I broke the law, and I would do it again. Judge Hart leaned back in his chair. Father, you are confessing to multiple crimes, aiding an escape, conspiracy. Do you understand the consequences? I do, and I accept them. But, Your Honor, I want to say something to this court, to this town. Speak. Hayes stood, turned to face the crowd. There are two kinds of law: the law written in books enforced by men, and the law written in the heart enforced by conscience. Sometimes those laws conflict, and when they do, a man must choose. 30 years ago, I chose the law of men. I stayed silent. I let an innocent man die. This time I chose the law of conscience. I spoke up. I acted. And if that makes me a criminal, so be it. I would rather be a criminal with a clear conscience than a law-abiding man with blood on his hands. The silence that followed was profound. Then from the back of the courtroom someone began to clap. Slowly at first, then others joined. Within seconds, half the courtroom was applauding. The other half sat in conflicted silence, unsure what to think. Judge Hart banged his gavel. Order, order. Father, you may step down. The judge turned to the jury. Gentlemen of the jury, you have heard all the testimony. You have seen the evidence, the drawing, the witnesses, the confession. Now you must decide. Is Ethan Wolf guilty of assault and attempted violation, or is he innocent? The jury did not need to deliberate. The foreman, an old miner named Caleb Stone, stood immediately. Your Honor, we don't need time. The answer is clear. Ethan Wolf is innocent. Not just not guilty. Innocent. He saved a woman's life. That's not a crime. That's heroism. Judge Hart nodded. Very well. Ethan Wolf, please stand. Ethan stood. Ethan Wolf, based on the testimony presented here today and the verdict of this jury, this court finds you not guilty of all charges. You are free to go. The crowd erupted. Cheers, applause, some crying. Ethan stood still, overwhelmed. Sam Ridge pushed through the crowd, embraced him. Tommy ran forward, hugged him around the waist. Even some of the men who had wanted to hang him came forward to shake his hand. But Kate did not move. She sat in her seat, watching tears streaming down her face. Not tears of sadness, tears of relief, of joy, of something else she could not quite name. Judge Hart was not finished. He banged his gavel until the room quieted. Furthermore, I want to say something to this town. This man risked his life to save Kate Bennett. He then risked his freedom to find the truth. He is a better man than many of us. We owe him an apology and our gratitude. He paused. However, there is another matter to address. Sister Kate, Father Hayes, Mother Grace, you three conspired to break a prisoner out of jail. That is a crime. Do you have anything to say for yourselves? Father Hayes stood. We do, Your Honor. We broke the law to serve justice. If that makes us criminals, so be it. But we will not apologize for saving an innocent man. The judge studied them for a long moment. Then, to everyone's shock, he smiled. In 30 years on the bench, I have seen many criminals, but I have never seen 3 people break the law with such pure motives. Your actions, while illegal, were in service of a higher law, the law of conscience, the law of truth. I will not punish you for that. Case dismissed. Another eruption, this time pure joy. That evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Kate walked to the chapel. The sun was setting, painting the windows golden red. She knelt before the altar, hands folded, rosary wrapped around her wrists. She had thought she would pray for guidance, for clarity, for God to tell her what to do, but when she opened her mouth, no words came, only silence. Deep, profound, peaceful silence. And in that silence, she heard the answer. It was not a voice, not a vision, just a knowing, a certainty that settled in her bones like warmth. She had mistaken refuge for calling, had mistaken fear for faith, had hidden behind vows she had taken for the wrong reasons, and God in His infinite mercy was releasing her, not condemning her, not punishing her, but freeing her. She stood, removed her veil, folded it carefully, removed her habit, folded that too. Underneath, she wore a simple white cotton shift. She picked up the clothes she had brought, the blue dress that had been her mother's, and put it on. It fit perfectly, as though it had been waiting all these years for her to be ready. She left the habit and veil on the altar, not discarded, honored, but finished. When she walked out of the chapel, Mother Grace was waiting. "You have decided." "Yes." "Are you at peace?" "I am." Grace smiled. "Good. Then you have made the right choice." "Are you disappointed?" "On the contrary, I am proud. You came here running from something. You are leaving running toward something. That is growth. That is faith." Kate hugged her. "Thank you. For everything." Grace held her tight. "Go, child. Be fully alive. That is what God wants from you." Kate found Ethan at the edge of town, standing near the creek, looking up at the mountains. He had changed back into his buckskins, as though the civilized clothes had been borrowed and must be returned. She approached quietly. He turned, saw her in the blue dress, her hair uncovered, her face radiant, and knew immediately what had happened. "You're leaving the order." "I have left. Past tense." He nodded slowly. "Are you sure?" "Completely sure. For the first time in 7 years, I know exactly what I want." "What do you want?" She stepped closer. "I want to live, really live, not watch from behind walls. I want to teach children, yes, but I also want to know what comes next, with you, if you'll have me." Ethan reached into his shirt, pulled out a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age, the letter from Mary. "I need you to read this, before you decide." Kate took the letter, unfolded it, carefully read. "My dearest Ethan, if you are reading this, I am gone. The fever has me, and our Daniel. I need you to know 3 things. First, this is not your fault. You were at the trading post. You couldn't have known. Don't carry guilt that isn't yours to carry. Second, I have loved you every day of our 15 years together. You gave me a good life, a full life, and I would not trade a single moment of it even for more time. Third, you will be tempted to hide, to run to the mountains and never come back, to live with ghosts instead of people. Don't. Live, Ethan. Live. Find someone new to love. Have more children if you can. Build something. Don't let our deaths make you die too. I release you. I set you free. Go. Be happy. That is my final wish. With all my love, Mary." When Kate finished reading, tears ran down her face. She looked at Ethan, saw that he was crying too. "She loved you very much." "Yes." "She wanted you to be happy." "Yes." Kate handed back the letter. "Then let's be happy. Together." Ethan took her hands. "Kate, I'm not an easy man. 25 years alone. I don't know how to be with someone." "Then we'll learn together. I live in a cabin, 1 room. I hunt and trap. I spend months without seeing another soul." "Then teach me. Teach me to hunt, to trap, to survive. I don't want to be protected. I want to be capable." "What about teaching the children?" Kate smiled. "I can still teach. We could come down once a month, or the children could come to us. We could build a school in the mountains, a place where children learn not just from books, but from the world." Ethan smiled. "You've thought about this." "I've thought about nothing else for 3 days." He pulled her close. 6 months. Give me 6 months to build us a new cabin down in the meadow, with 2 rooms, and a real bed, and a place for books. I'm not asking you to live in poverty." She laughed. 6 months. But Ethan, I visit every week to make sure you're doing it right." "Deal." They stood there by the creek as the last light faded from the sky, and for the first time in 25 years, Ethan felt something he thought he had lost forever. Hope. 6 months later, the new cabin stood at the edge of a high meadow a mile from Ethan's old one-room shelter, surrounded by aspen and spruce. It was not large, but it was beautiful. 2 rooms carefully built with glass windows and a stone fireplace and bookshelves lining one wall. Outside, a garden where vegetables and herbs grew side by side. A small corral where 2 horses grazed. A chicken coop. A workshop where Ethan built furniture and Kate dried herbs. And a schoolhouse. Small, just 1 room, but with 12 desks and a blackboard and maps on the walls. Every Friday, children came up from Silverton riding horses or walking with their parents. They spent the day learning, reading, writing, arithmetic in the morning, survival skills in the afternoon, how to identify plants, how to start a fire, how to track animals, how to treat wounds. Ethan taught the practical skills. Kate taught the academic ones. Together they taught something more important, that knowledge and wisdom were not separate, that books and mountains were both teachers, that a full life required both learning and doing. Tommy was there most of all. At 13, he had decided he wanted to be a naturalist, wanted to travel the world, drawing and documenting everything he saw. But first he wanted to learn from Ethan and Kate. They had become, in a way, the parents he had lost. On this particular Friday evening, after the children had gone home, Ethan and Kate sat on the porch watching the sun set. Kate's hand rested on her rounded belly. 6 months pregnant. The baby would come in the spring. "Are you scared?" Ethan asked. "Terrified, but in a good way." "Is there a good way to be terrified?" She laughed. "Yes, when the thing you're terrified of is also the thing you want most." He put his arm around her. "I never thought I'd have this again. A family, a future." "Neither did I. I thought I'd spend my life teaching other people's children, never having my own." "Do you regret it, leaving the order?" "Not for a second." Kate looked up at him. "I was so sure that my vows were my calling. But they weren't. They were my hiding place. You showed me the difference." We showed each other. They sat in comfortable silence. Then Kate spoke again. "Do you think about them, Mary and Daniel?" "Every day. But not the way I used to. I used to think about how I failed them. Now I think about how they loved me, how they would want me to be happy. And I am happy." Kate leaned against him. "Good, because I need you to be happy. I'm terrible at carpentry and hunting. Someone has to keep us alive." He laughed, a sound that was becoming more common. "You're learning. Last week you shot that rabbit. After missing 17 times. Practice makes perfect." A wolf howled in the distance. Kate shivered and Ethan pulled her closer. "Are you cold?" "No, just aware of how much I have to lose now. When I was in the convent I had nothing to lose. Now I have everything, and sometimes that scares me." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "Mary used to say the same thing. She said loving someone meant giving them the power to destroy you, and trusting them not to." "And do you trust me?" Kate looked up at him, her green eyes bright. "With my life, with our child's life, with everything." "Then we'll be fine, because that's all love really is, trust and courage, and we have both." 3 years later, on a spring morning when the wildflowers covered the meadows like a blanket of color, Kate gave birth to a daughter. They named her Mary Sarah Wolfe. Mary, for Ethan's first wife. Sarah, for the daughter Mary had always wanted but never had. The birth was difficult. Kate labored for 18 hours. Ethan stayed beside her the entire time, holding her hand, whispering encouragements, terrified he would lose her the way he had lost Mary. But Sister Agnes was there, and Mother Grace, and Anne Reed. And when the baby finally came crying, and red and perfect, Ethan wept. Kate held the baby exhausted, but radiant. "She's beautiful." She looks like you. She has your eyes." Ethan looked at his daughter, this tiny miracle, and felt something shift in his chest. Not the closing of an old wound, but the opening of a new chapter. Tommy, now 15 and already an accomplished artist, drew a picture that day. It showed Ethan and Kate sitting on the porch of their cabin, the baby between them, mountains rising in the background. He titled it, "The Family That Truth Built." Years later, that drawing would hang in the Colorado State Museum alongside Tommy's other works. He would become a famous naturalist, would travel the world, would publish books illustrated with his own sketches. But he never forgot where he learned to see, never forgot the mountain man and the former nun who taught him that truth mattered more than safety. Marshall Grant Dawson never fully recovered from his grief, but he did something with it. He started a program teaching survival skills to anyone who wanted to learn. How to identify poisonous plants, how to treat snake bites, how to survive in the wilderness. He taught for free every Saturday in the town square. When he died 10 years later, his tombstone bore a simple inscription. He made mistakes. He made amends. He made a difference. Father Benjamin Hayes lived another 20 years. He never left Silverton, never stopped preaching, never stopped telling the story of the trial of the choice he made, of the burden that was lifted when he finally chose courage over cowardice. On his deathbed, he whispered to the young priest who would replace him, "Remember, boy, God doesn't need our fear. He needs our courage. He doesn't need our perfection. He needs our honesty. And sometimes the most faithful thing you can do is break the rules." Ethan and Kate lived in their mountain cabin for 42 years, raised Mary Sarah, who became a doctor, taught hundreds of children, grew old together. And when Ethan died at 88, Kate was holding his hand just as he had held hers through the snake bite, through the trial, through the birth of their daughter. She lived another 6 years, long enough to see Mary Sarah marry, long enough to hold her first grandchild, long enough to write a book published posthumously titled The Serpent's Mercy, a true story of justice, courage, and love. In the introduction she wrote, "I was 29 years old when a snake bit me. I thought I was dying. But that snake bite saved my life, not because Ethan Wolfe extracted the venom, though he did, but because it forced me out of hiding, forced me to choose between safety and truth, between walls and life. I chose life, and it was terrifying, and it was beautiful, and I would choose it again, every single time." This is not a story about a snake bite. It is a story about courage, about the courage to tell the truth, the courage to love, the courage to live fully, even when living fully means risking everything. May you have such courage. May you choose truth over comfort, love over fear, life over mere survival. And if you are ever bitten by a serpent, literal or metaphorical, may you have the wisdom to seek help, and may you have someone like Ethan Wolfe to save you, not just from the venom, but from the walls you have built around your heart. The book became a bestseller, was taught in schools, was adapted into a play, and every year on the anniversary of the trial, people gathered in Silverton to remember that truth matters, that courage matters, that sometimes the most faithful thing you can do is break the rules. And that love, real love, the kind that saves lives and changes hearts, is always worth the risk. Always. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the meadow. Ethan finished his story, looked at Emily. She sat perfectly still, tears streaming down her face. "Grandpa, what happened to Kate? To Grandma Kate?" Ethan smiled, gentle and sad. "She died 6 months ago, in this very room, in my arms, at peace, happy, free. And every day of our 42 years together, she told me she was glad she chose life over safety, chose me over the convent walls." Emily wiped her eyes. "So you're saying I should run away?" "No, I'm saying you should choose. Running away is still running from something. Kate didn't run from the convent. She chose to walk towards me, towards a life she wanted. So don't run from Richard Morrison. That's letting him define your life. Instead, choose what you want, then walk towards that." "I want to go to college, study medicine, like Aunt Mary Sarah, become a doctor." Ethan's eyes lit up. Then do that. And if your father tries to stop you, you tell him Ethan Wolf said a man who forces his daughter into marriage is no different than a man who puts a snake in her path. Both are trying to kill who she really is. Emily hugged him tight. Thank you, Grandpa, for the story, for the courage. She walked to the door, turned. Do you miss her, Grandma Kate? Ethan looked out the window toward the meadow where wildflowers bloomed in impossible colors, where Kate had walked every morning for 42 years. Every second of every day. But I don't regret a single moment. Not the fear, not the risk, not even the pain of losing her. Because 42 years of living fully is worth more than 100 years of hiding safely. Emily nodded. I'll remember that. Good. Now go. Choose your life. And when you do, don't look back. Emily walked out into the fading light. Ethan watched her until she disappeared down the trail. Then he looked at the photograph on the shelf. Not the old one of Mary and Daniel. A new one. Kate at 60, her hair gray, but her eyes still bright, laughing at something he'd said more beautiful than the day he'd met her. He picked up the photograph, held it to his chest, and smiled. We did good, didn't we, Kate? We chose life. And it was worth every moment. Outside, the last light faded from the peaks. The stars came out scattered across the black sky like diamonds. A wolf howled in the distance, and in the cabin at 10,000 feet, an old man sat by the window holding a photograph surrounded by memories of a life well lived.